Welcome to PolyCast, a civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
CanusAlbinus,
Makahlua,
TheMeInTeam,
MegaBearsFan. Happy Saturday, Internet, and welcome to yet another episode of the PolyCast. This is episode number 381, and I am one of your regular co-hosts, MegaBearsFan, joined by, as usual, CanusAlbinus.
Hashtag shut up in Portugal.
Makahlua.
Hashtag powered by fizzy, fruity, caffeinated things.
And TheMeInTeam.
Ship of Theseus is the only ship I'll ride.
No! Thought we were done with that.
Phil was never done with that. So hey, speaking of Portugal patch, or the patch that gives us all the Portugal things, which, executive summary, do you like trade routes? Because if you're on a map that favors ocean trade routes, you're really going to like Portuguese trade routes. Holy crap. But, so the
I
Portugal
want my Portuguese trade routes now.
Maybe we can actually use Noobchical appropriately.
So we got it and introduced Johnny is I think Phil called it last time. Nobody can pronounce this name. Nobody unless you're actually Portuguese or Brazilian.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure our Portuguese listeners will be able to pronounce it correctly and will have no trouble correcting us when we fail.
He's going to look it up.
Inevitably.
And, Portugal has the Now, as Canus alluded to, navigation school in Vitoria, and also we've got a zombie defense mode now. Not so much yay. But to get more specific about the Now, that is a naval melee unit which is replacing the Caravel. It starts with 1 free promotions, less maintenance than the Caravel, and has 2 charges to build the Vitorias, which is the special shipping ports, which those guys are only built in a foreign city's coastal tile next to a luxury or bonus resource. See, when I was playing with Portugal last weekend on our multiplayer game, I kept forgetting about that part. Buy a resource. You can't just spam every single tile.
The pronunciation is Joao.
I almost did that, but then I thought that was wrong.
I keep wanting to say Jao instead of Joao. But I seem to have the letters in the wrong order.
And sending the trader out to a city with a Vitoria provides Portugal with additional gold and production, which I believe it's +4 and +1, respectively.
Yeah. +1 production, +4 gold, right?
Yes. The Civ unique ability is Casa de India, which significantly increases the yields of international trade routes, but limits those routes to cities on the coast or with a harbor. And it also grants trader units additional range and the ability to bark on water tiles as soon as they're unlocked. So you're getting out there quicker and faster, but if you wanted to do a little interior building, you can still use the trade routes, but they're not the internal. You can use internal routes within your empire, but you can't do all on land, but you can't do that with other nations on like your same continent.
Yeah, I think we were worried about that when the preview came out, was whether or not you could send internal trade routes to your own cities that are landlocked. And based on my brief experimentation this week, the answer appears to be yes. Yes, you can.
Yes, I had that in the game the other day where I can't remember why I had to look at it. Oh, it's because I had a landlocked city, actually. And obviously I can't send any other routes except to other places in the same continent. But that was fine. That worked for that city. The other and leader unique. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it does specifically say, I haven't had a chance to test this specifically, but it says that the foreign trade route has to go to a city on the coast or with a harbor, but it doesn't necessarily say that that route has to go overseas. So I'm wondering if the shortest distance between the cities is still a land route, even though both cities are on the coast, if it will still send it over land. Like if they're just like across a peninsula from each other, if it'll just go over land instead of sailing all the way around the peninsula. That was something that I did not get an opportunity to test, but that seems to be how the ability is worded.
Yeah, I might have a save from the multiplayer game and be able to load it and look at that. But I do remember the one time when I was dealing with the landlocked city, it was definitely only to other Portuguese cities. I suspect it's still going to be over the ocean because the excuse me, the traders are a little faster anyway. So the route's still going to be shorter.
Well, I don't think they move any faster. They just go farther. I think they still move one tile per turn.
Range. Okay.
Yeah, they just have longer range.
In Civ 6, the traders have a range, and they always take the same amount of time to finish a trade route. So they will move as fast as they have to finish the route within the allotted number of turns. So if it's like a 60 tile trade route, they'll move pretty fast.
Oh, okay.
Huh. I think I did not know. All right, so leader unique ability is Porta do Cerco, which grants all units, not just the naval units, but increased sight. Also increases your trade route capacity whenever Portugal meets a new civ and provides open borders with all city-states. Yeah, because I could tramp around all across the city-states. I didn't have to worry about that. And as far as my recollection from last weekend I think it was only with the proper civs, not the city-states, because there was enough city-states on the map that I probably should have had even more, but actually, I still only had 15 to 20 somewhere in there.
How many cities did you have?
I think I ended up with 8 or 9, somewhere there.
If you had 8 cities and you were in a game with 8 civs, you should have had about 16 trade routes.
Okay, yeah, because that was one of the things we were talking about before it came out. It's like, did that include the city-states? But based off of the one whole game I've played with Portugal, I think we can say that did not happen.
Because there are usually like 10 to 15 city-states. That would be kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, well, even even the routes you get with Portugal at this point are also kind of ridiculous. Because we got into it's a multiplayer game, it goes faster. It wasn't too far into ADs, and I was doing 500 or 600 gold a turn when we ended the. I was multiple times. I was sending out the better part of 1,000 gold to people here. Even before that, when it was still only like 200 gold a turn or 300 somewhere in there earlier, I was sending out the gift baskets of gold. Here, go fight things. Buy some units.
That's a phrase I haven't heard in a while.
Dan in the gift baskets.
We should set up a video where we test which makes more money, Portugal or Mansa Musa.
Ooh, gold fight. Portugal's other unique building is the Navigation School, which replaces the university and increases production toward naval units in each city that's built it. Just that particular city, not all your cities. Also increases the city science yields for every 2 coastal or lake tiles within the city's borders and more Great Admiral points.
Just what they...
Let's see. I don't know. So, yes. So I highly...
Victoria?
Victoria, didn't I not do... I thought I did the Victoria, but...
I think you did, but I think it was at a different point in this list.
Oh, yeah. Earlier when we were talking about the Now. But as a reminder, you can build it in the water on a coastal tile next to a luxury or bonus resource in a foreign city. You can't spam it to your own cities.
And that does include city-states. I tested that.
Yes, it definitely does, because there was a couple of city-states that were close by. I'm like, here, have Victorias. Oh, look, now my trade routes are worth like nearly 30 gold.
And because the leader gets open borders automatically with city-states, right? Like, it's easy to do that. The hard part, of course, is city-state tile annexation is based on the number of envoys that get sent there. So if there's not a lot of envoys getting sent to that city-state, its borders might not expand onto the water, so there might not be an available tile for you to actually place your Feitoria. And that can suck. Because there's nothing at all that you can do short of, waiting to earn more envoys and then pumping them into that city-state, hoping that it annexes the one water tile that you need to build your Fatoria.
Yeah, so can you... No, not that... No, not that one. This one! Over here, please!
And by default, I don't think empty water tiles are high priority for the auto spread.
Right, and I don't think you can build the Fatoria on top of a resource. It has to be adjacent to a resource. Maybe you can put it on top of, fish or something, and it just removes the fish, but it would have to be adjacent to another resource in order for that to be possible. So if you have, 2 fish next to each other, maybe you can put it on one of the fish. I don't know. But the resource also can be on land, which helps a little bit.
That would be major trolling if you could get rid of somebody's resource by settling.
Well,
yeah,
one of the things about the strategy for the Fatorias is going to be, because it buffs trade routes to that city, you typically are only going to want to put one in the range of any given city, because otherwise you're just giving free extra yields to a potential rival. I guess for city-states it doesn't matter, spam them as much as you want, but for other civs, one per city, otherwise you're just giving extra gold in production to a potential rival. The exception to that, however, could be because Fatorias cannot be removed. If you want to troll them, you can spam them in places to prevent that rival player from potentially building valuable late-game water infrastructure. No water park for you, no Sydney Opera House for you, no Statue of Liberty for you. Just put them in places where those sorts of things would be legal, or where it's the only possible place that they can be put, and the AI will never be able to build those things because they can't tear down the Fatoria in order to put them there.
And in the co-op game, it was actually beneficial for me to go and put Fatorias in people who were close enough for me to trade with, because they got gold and I got gold. Everybody wins.
Yeah, you just don't want to put down more than one unless you're being trolly, because like I said, you don't get, you as Portugal do not get any extra benefit from having 4 Fatorias in one city's borders, because you just get one, as far as I know, you only get one boost to the trade route. So you're just giving them free yield.
And you have to build extra nows to build lots of them, so...
Yeah, that's true too, and I don't think there's any way to increase the number of charges that you get on a now, so you just have to build more now.
Build more now?
Yep.
And, well, just based on what I've experienced, what other people have been experiencing playing it, I suspect when we get the April patch coming, that they're going to have to tweak some things with Portugal to not make it silly overpowered. I mean, it's still intended to be overpowered in terms of trade, but that felt last weekend to be a little ludicrous how much money I had.
But then again, we also all thought that they needed to nerf Gran Colombia, and the nerf that they ended up doing was the one thing that none of us thought actually needed to be nerfed, which was the Hacienda.
Yeah, it's we're not using that. What?
Well, you're using it, it's just not the thing that makes them incredibly strong.
Yeah, no, it's the things with the generals and having the extra movement point. That's
Yeah, it's like having every military bonus you could possibly want in the game all in one civ.
So based on that, they're going to cut down the Fatoria to only +3 gold or something?
Yeah, probably. Well, I mean, for Portugal, that would be funny, because then that just hurts the players besides Portugal. They'll probably buff it, it'll be 10 gold. But it only gives Portugal 4.
Gives the others... Oh, that's interesting.
Make everybody else rich.
Give everybody a Cerro de Pace.
You'd be pretty popular in multiplayer games.
Please, Portugal, come build things for me and send me trade routes, please.
I want your money.
So other non-zombie things we got in this pack was a wetlands map script, which is marshes, and marshes. The Torre de Belém World Wonder, which it used in real life, it's a gateway to Lisbon in Portugal. It grants additional gold and Great Admiral points, and international trade routes embarking from the city. You receive additional gold for every luxury resource at the destination. And when it's constructed, any cities owned by the civilization but located in other continents receive the cheapest building they can construct at that time. I should have built that the other day. And, oh boy. Etemenaki. It's a Babylonian ziggurat that grants additional science fields every turn, as well as bonus science and production to all floodplains in the city and in the city that builds it, and marsh tiles in that civilization. I think I saw Potato McWhiskey do something crazy with that in Portugal right after the pack first came out.
I'm sure it'd be nice on the wetland script.
That's what he did. He took the wetland script and that. I think it was the wetland script in that in Portugal, and was like, well, that's just ludicrous.
That's next week's topic.
Oh. Oops, sorry. Got ahead.
Next week, huh?
Well, not next week. The week after.
Oh, and I forgot, up with Portugal, their agenda, which is called Navigator's Legacy. They try to explore the map. They like civs that have explored more than other civs, and they dislike people who stay at home and never see the rest of the world. So explore more if you see Portugal.
Know the map.
I should have no problems tripping over that.
I will explore Portugal's territory very thoroughly.
Listen, it's Johnny, not his girlfriend.
Joao.
I know.
Joao.
Yes,
Joao.
we heard you, Johnny.
Joao. Joao.
Johnny will like it.
So, hey, while we're talking about repetitive things, zombies.
It's nice to see zombies in more games. It's pretty uncommon to see them these days, you know.
It's not like there's a whole series running on television that's all about zombies and after the zombies and, you know, other people trying to avoid the zombies or anything like that.
Well, you know, they're not really zombies because not one of them uses the Z word.
And they're like not in any games at all, so it's nice to see them finally.
That's right, they're totally legally distinct.
Looks like a zombie, shuffles like a zombie, you know. Anyway, the zombie defense game mode is a thing that you can turn on in a regular game, or you can, I suppose, dead that do not stay dead. They will rise from the ashes of war. They prey upon your lands. Basically, they're coming up from after battles and units die, and then I think they generate somewhat sort of like barbarians a little bit as well. But it's added some also defensive structures to the map, so you can try and keep them away. They can't pillage improvements, but they will go after any other units and try to attack them, and your city center and your districts. Its builders and military engineers can make some traps, some walls, and there's also some city projects. If a unit's destroyed by a zombie, it will come back up as a zombie. It's a small chance for them to start off from a normal battle between two normal units. Is when it's a zombie kills a normal unit. Well, that unit's coming back as a zombie. They can also get more units by if their attack lowers a city's population. Well, more zombies. And for every zombie that's killed somewhere in the world, the remaining ones and new ones come out stronger. I'd like to know how that makes sense. They're halfway across the map, and I kill off this one unit, and suddenly all these units are stronger. I guess that's meant to keep an escalating threat thing going, but still.
Troll
hive mind.
Troll the other players by killing a bunch of zombies and farming them.
This is true. So, I'm sure somebody will experiment with that in the near future, and we'll all find out about it in the video. There's two traps. There's a normal trap, or a trap you can build early on. It's unlocked with construction, uses a builder charge, doesn't prevent units moving through it, but if they sit there, they'll keep getting damaged. And when you get to ballistics and you have to use a military engineer, it's got a modernized trap. I guess it's got metal spiky things instead of wood spiky things. And then the two respective types of barricades is one that does minor damage to, but also exerts control, zone of control on, which that comes with military engineering and uses a builder charge. And there's a reinforced barricade that comes with rifling, has to use the military engineer to do it, but it does better damage, still has the zone of control. It does not prevent them, like the other ones, they can move through it, but it's going to slow them down. And it says also the existing infrastructure type things have been updated to also provide additional options. The fort, the Roman fort, the Great Wall, the Vampire Castle, the Maori Pa, and the Alcazar. That was from the Vikings scenario. And the city projects, you can build one in your holy site to turn undead, which will actually let you control the zombies in your city's territory for 15 turns when it gets done. Which you could use that to get them off your lawn, or you could go use them to attack your neighbor next door and make more zombie problems.
Phil finally has a use for holy sites.
Sure. Holy sites, yes. Those things I capture? Yeah, they're good.
Well, the campuses that he does build can do a dark signal, which, once again, you're going to get control of the zombies currently in that city's territory, but this time it lasts 30 turns. And there's a new city center spy action for a zombie outbreak. It has a chance to spawn one zombie per worked tile in the target city. Ooh, if that goes off in a high-pop city, that could get nasty.
Little incentive, I guess, to use specialists, which are otherwise complete crap in Civ 6.
If your city is over than like 5 or something, I don't know. Oh, no, 5's not enough. I know. Big city, more specialists, less people working tiles. And then the regular update stuff, well, obviously, because we have Portugal, they had to replace Lisbon. It's been replaced with Mogadishu. Fixed an issue where the production was not being added to holy sites and captured cities when having the boy, I'm having that kind of trouble today. Work ethic religious belief. Macedon's ability, Hellenistic fusion, is only going to trigger when a city is first conquered. It was previously apparently triggering for districts built after the city was occupied. There was an incorrect yield text for the Cliffs of Dover in some tooltips. I don't know. I don't see. I'm trying to see if there's anything really big in here.
The one thing that I noticed was under the Barbarians clan, I did not see a fix for the Ottoman Barbary Corsair being able to get infinite gold.
Oh.
I didn't see that either.
So that is presumably still in the game. That might take them a while to fix, because that's not that might not be an easy fix. Hopefully it does get fixed at some point, though.
You can know anybody who even just randomly rolls Ottomans like, well, time to go farm some gold.
Apparently there was a bug in multiplayer where Menelik of Ethiopia was not showing up in people's multiplayer game scenarios. That's a weird...
You mean like the game wouldn't select, or the game would not show the...
It said would not be available for base game multiplayer scenarios, so I'm assuming that would mean you load it into a scenario, and then under the leader select screen, Menelik was just not showing up.
Okay, alright. Gotcha.
I'm assuming that's what it means based on the wording here. Obviously, I never saw that happen.
There was a base game fix to... there was an issue where players couldn't trade great works or relics in the deal menu, so that's apparently that particular issue. We don't know if there's other ones, but now you can trade freely. Yeah, some things are specific to console things. I'm trying to skim through quickly, but a lot of this is like small fixes, and it's a lot of fixes.
Apparently the PS4 version was having a problem where retiring from the game would cause it to crash. So I guess the game retires from you.
Yeah, game is retired from you.
You can't fire me, I'm firing you.
You can't rage quit, I'm rage quitting.
Yeah.
Activate rage quit mode.
Apparently that's what the PS4 was doing. Yes, the classic various text fixes.
I know they had a thread on Civ Fanatics all about things they wanted fixed.
Things the Civ Fanatics users wanted fixed, or things Firaxis wanted fixed?
Both.
Was it just the text things, or was it all these other things?
It was all text things. All the text errors.
That they noticed. Because there's a lot of text, and you would have to go... It'd be very easy to miss a misspelling here and there, especially when you start reading through a really long file of text.
Oh yeah, you start patching and changing like Civ and leader and unit abilities and stuff like that. Like, you got to go back through the Civilopedia and all the tooltips. It's a lot.
One thing in the AI, it was AI's value of tech will be limited by the number of units it can build. It's like okay, so now are they going to look at how many like tanks they could build and see, I have this much oil which will support this much tank, so don't build past X tanks? Because that would be great. I mean, to your advantage when they overbuild, but at the same time.
Speaking of AI unit building behavior, has anybody seen the AI using air units yet, which was like supposed to be added a couple patches ago?
I haven't reached that point in the game yet. I keep winning too fast.
I was going to say it's the same problem with the multiplayer, is that we get over usually before we get to air.
Yeah, same here. Haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah. We know what we're doing too well. We don't get to air. I guess I could check by doing an advanced start. We already got air. Let's see if they'll use it.
That's right. All the multiplayer games should be advanced start.
I'm pretty sure there's somebody who would disagree with you about that.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I think
He's not here anymore. Right now,
you wouldn't disagree.
Brigadier Act.
I think that's about it for patch things, unless you guys have spotted anything else interesting.
This seems pretty mundane for now. Got that big patch coming up at the end of this month.
Yeah, which will probably be an even bigger list of things and stuff changed, and goodness knows what else.
For our next topic, we're going to talk about, briefly, the Civilization VI World Cup, which is put on by, I believe it's the We Play Civ developers and people that are on that website. Is that who it is, I think? Or Civ Players League. And they've been doing team matches for the last couple of weeks, and they are just now starting the second phase of the tournaments. And we recommend that you guys go watch them if you feel like watching some multiplayer Civ. They have French and Russian language casting as well, and it's all on Twitch. So
apparently they've got a mod on that tries to balance the game for multiplayer a bit better.
I would be curious to know what that mod does.
Yeah. Me as well.
I wonder if it's available on the Steam Workshop, or if it's like a mod that they...
Oh, okay. You can actually navigate to it from the site in question. But you can also just look it up on Steam. I have it open here, but it's got a full changelog, okay, but it's a full feature list.
Does it at least have like a description of what it like tries to do in general?
Okay, the changelog is the description of it's a description of what has been changed. It's not like just a patch thing, I guess, because it's got like lists for every civilization.
There's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah, this would be a topic unto itself. I don't know that we would want to. But this is worth giving a look at our feature point.
Oh, it looks like they've got links to a handful of mods.
Yeah.
Better balanced game, and then better balanced starts, and then what looks like a couple of UI mods.
Yeah.
Something like a big overhaul pack that you'd see on in RPG games or something. You know, it's like we took a few mods and we did some other tweaks of our own, and this whole package together.
You would really need something like this, though, to make it more fair in Civ 6. And if you balance the starts in addition to the civs, then you can actually have something better resembling a competitive environment. Because that just wasn't the original design goal of Civ 6 itself. So it's good to see this being done to this degree. And this is quite comprehensive. It's way more than I can look at and just comment on on how well it is. I would trust the experts here to judge this better than I even. By experts, I mean the people in the multiplayer games. But yeah, this is very comprehensive.
I would imagine the Civ Players League has a pretty good handle on what you need to do to be a good Civ Players League.
Yeah, for sure. And in most games, there's always like a bit of a divide in terms of like what elite play looks like in single player versus multiplayer. But there's a lot of things that translate between the two. Just because, like, regardless of whether you're trying to win at the earliest date or defeat human opponents, like you still need to optimize your yield. You still want to research effectively. You still don't want to throw units away, etc. So some of the details are going to be different, but there's going to be a lot of things that translate. Have fun with diplomacy, though.
Speaking of
What
diplomacy,
Speaking of diplomacy, indeed. So over on Anchor, you can listen to actually quite a few podcasts by developers of the Old World game. And one of them is Soren Johnson, which is the one we are covering today. And it goes through a number of things, like how he got to be where he is, some of his experience with previous games, and then some of personal life stuff. So there's a lot there if you're interested. What jumped out to me, of course, was the discussion towards the middle of the podcast about the design constraints around AI and what a good AI should look like and whatnot. I guess I disagree less with Soren now than on his older PowerPoint presentation or whatever about good AI versus fun AI. There are some caveats to that. But broadly speaking, his argument is that it's okay for there to be asymmetry between the AI and the human player, and that the design of the game needs to factor that. Like, when you're designing the game, the AI has to be integrated into the design of the other mechanics of the game. And that I definitely agree with. I only half agree with the with how much asymmetry is okay. It depends on how the game is structured. Because he actually mentioned Into the Breach, same people who made Faster Than Light, as an example of an asymmetric game, and that's very much true. The the bugs are much stronger / more numerous / whatever than the human, but that, you know, they're not really a competitor in an environment like a rival civilization would be a competitor in an environment. So there's a trade-off there. So to what degree do you make the AI a different experience than just a competitor in the game? You have to integrate that in your design. You have to make a choice there, how far you're going to take that.
Yeah, as I've said many times on the show in the past, one of my biggest frustrations with the AI difficulty in Civ 6 is how front-loaded, in the Civ franchise in general, is how front-loaded everything is, and how that all but forces certain gameplay styles from the player, whether you like that style or not, and that the AI basically gets diminishing returns from those early game bonuses as the game goes on, because, you know, the human player is like conquering their cities and stuff like that and turning their bonuses into your bonuses, and in some senses, like, it can actually make it easier for the human player as the game goes on, because you're, you know, conquering more developed cities and with more districts and stuff like that already built.
I think that's a little bit away from what he was getting at, though. Another thing he mentioned is that he likes the idea of the multiple victory conditions back when it was made, but thinks that it's probably holding the turn-based strategy games back these days. And that's something I definitely agree with. We've seen this play out in all the Civ games that have implemented multiple victory conditions, is that ultimately some of them are emphasized more than others, because when you take for granted that every Civ is trying, there isn't, you know, 6 victory conditions. There's really only 1 or 2. One being conquest, and 2 maybe something that breaks a tie between nations that struggle to conquer each other in more defensive-oriented games. So he actually is designing Old World in a way where there are different, like, the player has more victory options available than the AI, and you won't just, like, suddenly lose to, like, the equivalent of an AI random religious victory or culture victory, for example.
Yeah, for a long time when I was playing Civ 4, I disabled all of the victory conditions except for, I think it was domination, or I always get it confused whether it was domination or conquest, which was the one where you had to have like 60% of the global land area.
Domination.
And 60% of the population, and that included the land area and population that you had from your vassals. So
a fraction of it, yes.
Oh, was it a fraction? Okay.
Yeah.
I really like that a lot because I felt like I was, it didn't push you to have to pursue this one particular style of play. It was basically grow your civilization however you want, and when you get to the point where you have dominated a majority of the world, you win, which is the point where the game should end.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with the Council victory in the old Master of Orion series. The way that worked, it was pretty hard to just insta-cheezo in diplomatically. You could, I guess, and that cheapened the game maybe a little bit. But for the most part, you had to be in a winning position already before you could win that way. But then once you were in a winning position, you could just end the game with that rather than grinding it out. And it was the same thing with domination at Civ 4. But then Civ 4 had wonky stuff. Apostolic Palaces is one of the obvious examples. But I would say even UN and culture they would take you away from a lot of what you would typically do otherwise when playing a game of Civ 4. And it really had very little to do with your nation's research strength, size, progression, all that stuff. Like, you could win with 3 cities culture on deity as long as you could convince the AI not to declare on you, which you very frequently could. And just the requirements required to play that out versus like winning an AI conquest of the AI on deity, the difference is massive. So yeah, you really did have like multiple subsystems there that were already assuming that the AI wasn't going to try. So if you're going to do that, then I agree with Soren that you might as well just make an asymmetric scenario from the start and build that into the design so that the game can be challenging in an interesting way rather than just heaping the AI with loads of stuff and then having it only sort of play the game but not really try to win. If you're going to do that, just make it more like FTL or whatever, where the AI and the human aren't playing the game if you're not going to uphold their trying to play the same game anyway.
Yeah, because a human player can see things are trending in a different direction and change their strategy mid-game and go for a different victory. But if the AI tries to do that, it just is like having an ADHD moment where I'm going to do this for a little bit. No, I should switch to this victory. I should do this for a minute. No, I should do this victory. Switch over here. And you can see that sometimes that it's like the game, I think in Civ 6 will tell you that so-and-so is no longer going for a science victory, which is based on some other stats, but the AI can't focus in as well as a human can to I'm primarily going for domination, but maybe I want to try to see if I can win diplomatic on the side,
Even back in Civ 4, it would flip-flop between culture and other things.
Yeah.
Often to its detriment. Sula did a huge series of games for just AI playing AI, and multiple times you could observe an AI that really should have won if it just kept to its course, and then just randomly decided to go culture and stop trying, and then it would lose. And that was against other AI. Now, this is something we're seeing because of the quality of the AI in the games we've played. If we have like machine learning AI or whatever, it's unwinnable, even if it has no bonuses. Like, we would never beat something like that. But I don't know that would make the game better either. I think you'd have to have some asymmetry at that point because the AI would just outplay everybody.
It would be more challenging, but it wouldn't be very fun necessarily for the human player.
Yeah, you'd have to have bonuses, and then even with bonuses, you probably have to be an expert to win. With the quality of what we're seeing with machine learning in other games, stuff like Alpha Star, Alpha Chess, like those things are beating the very best players at their respective games and doing so handily without effort. The StarCraft one was a major eye opener to me. That tells me that in pretty much the majority of games that exist now, if they wanted to apply machine learning to it and invested enough resources to make that happen, they could put something into the product that would be unwinnable to the player. Because Alpha Star was playing on the ladder, and it was beating the best players in StarCraft 2 easily with its best agents. With a constraint on APM and with only information available that would be available to the player, it was still handily trouncing everybody. So that's impressive. But I don't know that would make the future of gaming very fun if that's the route they went. So yeah, I think if you're going to do asymmetry, then do it right. And I think for any game, it is very important to have the AI developers be in sync with the mechanical developers and whatnot, because there's realistic constraints on what you can do. And when that isn't factored, you get all kinds of nonsense that we see in some of the Civ games. We definitely see it all the time in Paradox titles, where the AI doesn't know how to handle the mechanics that are put into the game at all. Like, if there's no consideration for that, or I shouldn't say no, but there's minimal consideration for that leads to predictable problems on a reliable, recurring basis, because that isn't factored sufficiently. So I definitely agree with Soren there.
And it certainly doesn't help in the case of Paradox that they're updating, the game so often and in such large ways that it's hard to rewrite your AI to accommodate the new play. Like, for instance, removing all of the faster than light options in Stellaris in an update. Like,
yeah, I mean, I understand why they did that, but then when you do that, you have to understand the realities of what kind of burden you're going to be putting on your AI team versus design team, and factor that.
Right.
I think Paradox over and over and over and over again adds more features than they can support.
Yeah, and with Civ, we get, with big updates, when we do a full expansion and we get a new major level mechanic, and usually the first question, or one of the first ones one of us will ask is, well, does the AI understand how to use this? Because there's some things we get that are very powerful in human hands, but you look at it and how you have to work it, and you're like, how is the AI going to get how to use this?
And even with simple things like leader and civilization unique bonuses, like does the AI have any comprehension of how to utilize these bonuses so that they can actually take advantage of the strengths of their civilization and leader?
Yeah, it's tough. But then, to what degree does the AI's lack of understanding and using that detract from the game? I would argue it does, but I don't know that it's... I don't know. I'm not as confident in saying that it does by enough that on balance it wasn't worth adding. So,
yeah, it's worth adding because it gives entertainment for the human player, because you have something new to try and it keeps you engaged in the game. But it doesn't necessarily make the AI super weaker. It adds a few more cycles maybe to what it's doing, but it's not handicapping the AI to not understand it. Although
I just wonder how much better the game could be if it was integrated better.
Yeah,
but you don't know. I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows that, even in the industry. Like, you can guess, but unless you have empirical data to back it, you're just guessing. And it's hard to separate out factors like which contributes to a game's success versus what doesn't.
Yeah, if you could find a medium in between the AI we have now and the machine learning, there's got to be some sort of spot in there where the AI could be a little more sophisticated and not take up so much resources on an average PC, and yet still be able to respond to some of this.
Well, even with AI learning, I think you can still have adjustable difficulty settings. It would just be a thing where the AI would be programmed to not make the optimal decision all the time. It would know the optimal decision, it just wouldn't necessarily make it.
Like how Chum's chess engines can be set to blunder with a frequency comparable to a given rating of player, I guess, yeah. Yeah.
And if you have robust machine learning in place, like, that's even something where you could implement that to be dynamic, so that the AI will get harder or easier, rubber banding sort of, depending on how well the human player is doing, so that the game always feels competitive. But
I don't like rubber banding, unless you mean by the quality of the AI's decisions, rather than...
Right, no, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, if the AI is running away with the game, it could tone down its play to let the human player remain competitive and not just rage quit, so give you a challenge to overcome, as opposed to just abandoning the game, or vice versa. If you're running away, then the AI is like, hey, time to step up our game.
The competitor in me doesn't like that, but a lot of games do something like that already and have found success in it, but it just feels dishonest to me. So I won't endorse it, but I mean, it's being done for a reason, so I guess.
You would want that to probably be a setting or an option that can be disabled on top of just having regular difficulty levels.
So yeah, I do wonder this from time to time when it comes to various features in a game. Like, how important is any one piece of the game towards its overall success? For example, if like Civ VI was as good as Now, or even maybe slightly better, but it just had awful music or awful sound effects, but otherwise it was like really good, how many sales would you lose on that? Like, is there a model for that at all? Could people make a good guess as to how much that would change the outcome of the title's performance? I don't know. I'd be surprised if anybody knew.
Well, given the vitriol that some people had for the art style of Civ 6 when it was first announced and released, and considering that, as we're going to talk about shortly, how well the game has performed in sales, I'm guessing it probably was not that big of a factor.
Yeah, but then again, let's say the art style was some theoretical optimal. It's hard to say because people have different tastes. But let's just say that they had instead chosen whatever art style is the most preferable on average. What's the difference between its performance in our history versus if they'd chosen that art style? Again, how do you even make an estimate for something like that? I don't know that you can. Other than trying stuff and then seeing, I guess.
And I would like
easy data to get.
And I would like to say for the record that I personally do not have any problems with Civ 6's art style. I think the game looks great.
I mean, yeah, for me, it's a strategy game. What I care about is the presentation of information, and that it doesn't look like a trash can. I don't have high standards for the graphics. If anything, what annoys me the most is just that a lot of information isn't easily available as it could be, or that it takes more inputs to access it. But I've touched on that to death.
That's not a graphics thing, though. That's a UI thing.
To some degree, but there are some graphic things, the very common meme of "Is this a hill or not?"
Yeah, that
you don't have the tile yields on. Good luck with that. So, I mean, to some degree, it can be a graphics thing. Graphics can interfere a little bit because the graphics themselves do convey some information about what's going on in the game, and if they're sufficiently bad, it can detract from your experience. But usually that's not a serious factor.
But compared to Civ 5, Civ 6 does communicate a hell of a lot more information on the graphics than Civ 5 did.
I don't know. I've never quantified that. That'd be interesting.
Well, the fact that every piece of infrastructure is a 3D graphic on the map is by itself a huge upgrade.
That's true, but if you just turn tile yields on, how much difference is there in practice? I don't know. You might be right.
Yeah,
Civ 5 is my least favorite of the modern titles for several reasons.
Yeah, you didn't have to find some way to... you would almost have to scroll through their city list to see if they'd built X or Y, whereas in Civ 5, you just zoom in close on the map and go, oh, they've got that,
Right.
And yeah, I mean, Civ has never... I mean, Civ has had the pretense of having symmetry, but there's never been symmetry between player and AI in any of the Civ titles, except maybe the early ones. I forget exactly what they did, but Civ 3 and on, no. Especially not if you raise difficulty, but even if you don't, the AI is not quite playing the same game. Yeah, not in trying to win, and not in terms of what information and bonuses are available to it, even on the most neutral settings. So yeah, I guess factor it and try to make it more fun. But then the other concern is how that impacts multiplayer, or if you have a multiplayer at all. But most games do, and most people want multiplayer. So you would then need to have effectively two different games, one for single player and multiplayer. That's non-trivial. I'm not saying you can't do it. Certainly, games like Call of Duty do it, but and mileage may vary to what degree that makes it for a good game. But they are certainly different experiences.
Well, let's talk about a couple of other little things. These are going to be short topics, but there was an article today, or a few days ago, on PC Games N. I don't know exactly what the N stands for, but there was an interview with Anton Strenger, who is the director or the designer for the DLCs for Civ 6, and he said that the numbers show that the new Frontiers expansion pass provided more new player action than either of the two prior expansions. So people seem to like the new Frontier pass in terms of hard numbers.
And normally it would be at a disadvantage given the game's age, which also is mentioned in the article.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is interesting.
Something to do maybe with the fact that it's a constant feed of small little things instead of you getting the big expansion and going through all its things and getting tired of it quickly.
I don't know.
Something new to look forward to.
This was after release data, right? So you'd still expect to attract more interest with more stuff going on, right? Unless the things added in and the new Frontier Pass were just more attractive to new players than the things added in the previous expansions.
I mean, it could be, yeah, a lot of things that people have asked for a really long time in terms of, like, you know, the civilizations being offered and stuff like that. And it's like, yay, that's finally in the game. I'm going to check it out now.
And then the article ends with a strong indication that they have not decided what they're actually going to do next. So maybe they haven't decided if there's going to be another season pass or if they're going to do Civ 7 next. Which is PR speak because we know they've already started Civ 7 because game design dictates that it will have started 3 years before it's announced. So,
well, or at least whatever the next game is going to be. If, you know, it might not necessarily be Civ 7, it might be a different title. Like, you know, they did Beyond Earth before and stuff like that. So it could be something else.
yeah.
But yeah, more than likely
I
probably
could
a
still
Civ
see
7.
the success of something like this extending the life of a game, though. Like, if things are still selling well, they might not be as inclined to push out a new title that competes with it until the numbers start dying off.
Well, I remember it was, what was it, like Marvel's Avengers and other live service games like that. We're talking about, you know, 10-year life, and Anthem, games like that. We're talking about 10-year life cycles, you know, in the hype leading up to the release of the game. And then, of course, they both flopped and are probably, Anthem, I think, is already dead. EA's announced they're not going to continue to support the game, and they're canceling the big patches that were supposed to fix the game. And I would not be surprised if Marvel's Avengers goes the same way. But Civ 6 is going, what, on 5-6 years now? I think it came out in 2016.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And
I
it's
mean,
not unheard of. Like, CK2 had a long run like that. EU4 is looking like it'll hit 10 years before we get a new one. So, yeah.
yeah, you have more success with long-term success with niche titles like this because there's not so many competing titles to pull players' attention away. You know, there's a new open world live service game coming out, you know, every other month for people to drop their old game for. So there's not very many turn-based strategies.
We are seeing more turn-based strategy cropping up now, including Old World.
That's true. Firaxis may have to step up its game.
Yeah, competition is healthy. Well, I'm hoping for these competitors to be good.
Early 2020s is the new strategy renaissance or something.
It would be nice. Well, I'll believe it when I see it, but I want to see it. So let's see it. Yes.
I will say, though, that this news does sound like it might bode poorly for people who are hoping for more traditional expansion packs to continue.
Yeah, probably.
Because it means maybe now that doesn't happen. If these were that much more successful, you know, in terms of player engagement and dollars, you know, spent on the game, then we might not see full expansion packs for Civ 7. We might just see 2 or 3 season passes with this monthly drip feed of new content. And I hope that's not the case, because I have always thought that the Civ games have had an excellent model for expansions.
Yeah.
I think we'll get a mix of both, personally.
I hope so. But maybe instead of 2 expansions, it's 1 expansion and 2 DLC passes. But we'll see.
And then our second minor topic is from The Regular PC Gamer, which I believe is a magazine, but this is the internet version. And it's just a little piece that's talking about how without civilization, PC gaming would look very different. And its general thesis is that civilization basically built the turn-based strategy into the model that most of the games that use it now use. And also have infected a lot of turn-based strategies as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly other turn-based stuff at the same time were very influential as well. The Here's Some Wind Magic series, for example. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that without any of those, gaming would look pretty different in terms of turn-based strategy. Although, if we're talking about early to mid-90s or even late 90s gameplay for turn-based strategy, I would still give the title over to either Here's Some Magic or the Warlord series. Which really, those of you born on this side of the century, Mark, or probably aren't familiar with just how good the Warlord series really was in the 90s and how ahead of its time it was. But yeah, it was incredible, and I would argue way better than the early Civ iterations. But the over time that flip flopped, and Warlords kind of stopped even being turn-based strategy, and then Civ got better.
And most of those older ones don't even exist anymore. The Heroes of Might and Magic series is a shell of its former self.
Yeah, we're just going to pretend it stopped after 5.
Well, you mean
So
you're not
that-
going to mention the ones that don't exist?
Which ones?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember them.
I mean, you had a good run, though. 5. And 5's pretty good.
Your memory is suddenly failing. I just can't remember. What was that?
Yeah. I mean, some of it just comes down to how the companies are structured. Because I feel like if the people who were part of SSG had continued making turn-based strategy games like Warlords, they would still be great today. But they went on to other projects in different game genres, or sometimes left the game development entirely. So, yeah, when your best talent leaves, you get a different-looking company. That even happened to Blizzard eventually.
There's also circumstances where, very few game companies only make one game, and if your other games flop, you invested so much into them that can kill the company. Like, isn't that what happened with the what was it? The Interplay, the company that made the original Fallout games.
Or even if you don't necessarily get bankrupt, but then you get to this point where you have to sell it off to a bigger company, and then the bigger company totally changes what you do. EA in a lot of places.
Yeah, EA has that track record of buying small independent developers, rolling them into EA, then forcing them to make a game that's not in their wheelhouse. A case in point, again, Anthem was made by the BioWare people, which are the Mass Effect and Star Wars Old Republic guys. They make, grand sci-fi RPG in the Dragon Age 2, right?
Yes.
So not explicitly sci-fi, but they make these grand action RPG games, and then they were tasked with making a friggin' Destiny clone, and they just didn't know how to do that because that's not their wheelhouse.
To be fair, they didn't exactly know how to make Mass Effect after the third one either.
Oh, that was more to do with the story side people getting into a kerfluffle. Here's this guy.
I maintain that Andromeda was not as bad as people thought it was.
There was a knee-jerk reaction to a lot of graphical issues in that game that became memed.
It had an unfortunate bug right at release, and it made it have horrific faces. But once that was fixed, it was fine.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that Mass Effect kind of died with Andromeda, but every Assassin's Creed game that's come out since since after Black Flag has had similar horrible problems at launch, but somehow Assassin's Creed keeps recovering and keeps releasing a new game every year.
It's a shame since the ending to Mass Effect 3 was so good.
That's where I was trying to get to, because there was one guy in the beginning who had an idea of how to do the story arc across the three things, and then they got into a creative disagreement, and so he left, and then they had to do their own thing. So they were building on they built a different story on top of it, and that's how you get to the three colors ending in Mass Effect.
So we're getting a Mass Effect 5 now, so...
Yes, we'll have to see.
Yeah,
sure, it'll
EA...
be 20 or 25 before we get it, but...
It'll be at least as good as the newer Halos.
Yeah, and that's... I mean, it's good. It's good that the reaction and criticism of Anthem actually caused EA to say, hey, maybe we should let this developer go back to making the games that they're good at making, instead of just shutting them down like they did with, Visceral Studios and however many other studios that, made one flop and then the whole studio was canned.
Well, that's exactly what happened to the studio that made Andromeda. They don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
They got canned before they even finished Andromeda, really.
Yeah, and that also is what happens when you outsource, an IP to a different developer, instead of letting the developers who made the IP successful continue to make that game.
They made a farm studio, basically. Took the one person responsible for the ending and put him in charge of the new game, and took everyone else off of it. That was going to end well.
Well, I guess an analogous situation kind of has worked well with the Civ, where a lot of times the designer of the next game was a modder or expansion developer for the previous game. So,
Well, yeah, but that's by design. They do that on purpose. Every main series Civ game has a new designer. That's how it's always been.
I'm wondering, was he not for both 1 and 2?
Nope, Brian Reynolds did Civ 2.
That's right. Okay.
I think they were both credited, but yeah, Reynolds, I think, did most of the work.
All right, then. This has been PolyCast episode 381. Thank you for joining us. I'm TheMeInTeam, and I was joined by CanusAlbinus.
One of these days, we're gonna have to write a memo.
Makahlua.
Oh boy, time to go back to being frustrated at car searches. Yay.
And MegaBearsFan.
My tortoise has woken up from hibernation, which means the long, grueling summer is upon me.
Whee!
Do you have a tortoise?
Yep.
Civilization 3, 4, 5, Beyond Earth, and 6 sound clips. Copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright the PolyCast at thepolycast.net.